All right, let's see who's coming in today. Hi everyone, we have another Teen Science Cafe today. I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who have been with us before, you know the drill. And for those of you that are new, give me one moment and I'm going to tell you what we do. I just want to open up a couple of documents. So, that is not what I wanted to do. It would help if my mouse worked today. All right, I see some of our usual suspects are back today. Hi, Simon and Jack. Hi, Emily. Hello, Mariah and Adrian from the fluffy dreamland. Nice. Hi, Desmond. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lauren Traster. I am the 4-H Teen and Leadership Program Coordinator here at UVM Extension. I also coordinate these science cafes, which I love, and I love that we get to meet every week to learn something new about science. So for those of you who are new here, please find your chat box, and we like to do introductions. And as you can see, they've already started. We have Summited Scout from Maine and Catherine's from Vermont. We have Sage also from Maine. So just go ahead, put your name in the chat. Let us know where you're from. I am also going to put in the chat right now if you need the live captioning today. That is the link where you can access the live captioning. Hello, Fiona from Vermont. So as we are waiting for everyone to join in, I'm going to go over our protocols for when we are gathering together here in Zoom. Hi, Eric from Vermont. So all of you are muted today. We can't see you. You're only going to be able to see myself and our presenter. And you don't have the ability to unmute yourself. The way you are going to communicate today is through the chat box and through the Q&A box. And we use those two things very differently. We use the chat box for you to share your thoughts and your comments. If the presenter asks you a question, you're going to answer in the chat box to create a back and forth communication. The chat box is not to be used for off topic. So we stay on topic in the chat box to keep things moving along so we don't create any distractions. If you have questions for our presenter, those go in the Q&A box. And those will get answered, but they may not get answered immediately. So when you ask your question, try to be as clear and specific as possible so that we know what you're referring to, because it may be several slides later or maybe 10 minutes later before your question gets answered. But again, all questions do get answered. That is the beautiful thing about our science cafes. The questions you have, our scientists will answer them for you. So remember to be courteous and respectful to everyone today. And again, just don't create any distractions. The only way that happens in this format is with the chat box. If I do see that the chat box is being used inappropriately, I will private message you and tell you to stop. But you all have been so good over these last many, many weeks that I don't expect that to be a problem. So I always appreciate how engaged you all are. So that's the last thing, just stay engaged, participate fully. That is why you are here today, to learn something. So let's do that. So I just want to remind you, I always like to share other opportunities with you. We still have the Speak Up contest that the deadline is November 30th. So there's 5 more days for that. That actually, if you win in your age category, you could win a $50 gift certificate. So I encourage you all to check that out. And we have, after today, we have 3 more science cafes before our holiday break for the new year. And I am happy to tell you all, I am putting together the schedule for January through June. We have some amazing topics that have come up. So I'll be announcing that schedule soon. So Jack, the gift certificate, yes, for the Speak Up contest. If you enter the Speak Up contest and submit a video by November 30th, There's 3 age categories that we're going to pick a winner. Simon, okay, thank you. And if you win in your age category, you'll win a $50 gift card. So I would encourage you all to check that out. It is, you know, talking about something that you feel passionate about, something you want to see in your community change. So it might be of interest. And then, of course, there's that added bonus of getting some spending money, right? Okay. So I always let you guys know our friends at Vermont Brain Bee are still meeting every week. If neuroscience is your thing or you want to learn more about the brain, I would encourage you to check out what they're doing at vermontbrainbee.com and maybe participate in their weekly sessions. We also have our friends at the Lake Champlain Sea Grant. They have one more Zoom a Scientist session on December 4th. And then our friends in Maine have their teen science cafes, and they've added some new dates and topics, which you can see here. I'm going to put these links in the chat as soon as I am done talking, so you'll all have these links so you can go check them out. So today we are talking about privacy on the internet. Why does it matter and how do we get it? And our presenter today is Professor Joe Neer. And I just want to give you a little bit of information about Joe. He is an assistant professor of computer science at the University of Vermont and a member of UVM's Center for Computer Security and Privacy. His research interests include data privacy, computer security, and programming languages. Joseph received his BS in computer science from Indiana University and his master's and PhD in computer science from MIT. So let's all welcome Joe to our Teen Science Cafe. And Joe, it is all yours now. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. All right, is my screen visible, I hope?
Yes.
All right, let me move my mouse over here. I wonder if these little videos in the side, can everybody else see that or do only I see that?
The little videos, those are you and I.
Okay, right, I was just curious if everybody can see that or if
yes,
only
yes.
shows up.
All the participants can see that.
So my name's Joe. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Vermont in the computer science department. And I do research on privacy on the internet and privacy in general, privacy especially in kind of how we analyze data. So I'm going to talk a lot about privacy today. I'm going to talk about some other issues that show up on the internet and in kind of some of the modern ways that we deal with data. And a lot of the problems I'm going to talk about today actually are kind of issues that come up when new ways of using data surprise us. Okay, so this is almost a technology talk and a society talk as much as it is a science talk. All right, so I guess there's a picture of me. I wanted to get that on there just in case you couldn't see me, but I think you can all see me. So you've all seen this. That plaid symbol there, that's the research lab that I'm part of at the University of Vermont. So I'm part of this Center for Security and Privacy at the University of Vermont, and our kind of research arm is called the Plaid Lab. And we do research in security and privacy and algorithmic fairness, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today as well. So I've been at the University of Vermont since 2018. That's when I moved here, so I'm a relatively recent transplant to Vermont. Before that, I lived in California. I was a postdoctoral researcher at the University of California at Berkeley. And before that, I was getting my PhD at MIT. So, you know, the first thing that everybody from Vermont asks me is, how can you possibly move here from California, right? You must hate it here because we actually have winter. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I lived in Boston before that. I know what winter's like. And I grew up in Indiana. That's the symbol for Indiana University. That's where I did my undergrad. And so we had winter there also. But I kind of started out, I grew up in a small town. So in Indiana University is in Bloomington, Indiana. And There's about 30,000 students at Indiana University, and there's about 60,000 people in Bloomington. So the university is like half the town. And I'm very pleased to be back in a small town again, or a reasonably small town. I really enjoy living in Vermont. So before I start talking about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about me, but logistics-wise, the reason there's two of me, I don't know if everybody can see that, but I'm logged in twice. I'm logged in on another computer right here, so I can see the chat at the same time and the Q&A. And I would like to encourage everybody to ask questions as we go along, and I will do my very best to answer them as we go. And so I'm going to start doing that now. I see actually in the Q&A there's a question already. What's my favorite coding language? What do I use the most? And I actually don't have a huge preference on this, right? I would say the one that I use the most is Python. I'm going to show you some examples of Python today. And the reason that I use it the most is just because everybody else uses it. It's becoming kind of the language for coding that the vast majority of people know. A lot of software is written in Python. And so we tend to use that just because that's what everybody else uses. I like programming in some kind of less well-known languages like Haskell, which is a functional programming language. There's some other kind of related functional programming languages like Scheme and Racket that I find a lot of fun. But I don't get the chance to program in those very often because if I write code in those languages, nobody else can use it. It kind of tends to be the case. Okay, so what gets me excited? So we're going to talk about privacy today. That's the first thing here. And there's a Netflix envelope there. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. So this is going to be our topic for today. Another thing that I'm really into is bikes and bike racing. So that's me after a race in the rain back when I raced for MIT. And when you race bikes in the rain, you know, you're all kind of in a big pack. You're following somebody close in front of you, and their bike kicks up a bunch of water and mud into your face, and so you look like this afterwards. So I've been racing bikes for a long time, and this is another reason I love living in Vermont. It's an awesome place to ride bikes. The other thing that I mention often is that I really like going to arcades. I have two kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they love going to arcades, and I love it too. And so we go to arcades any chance we have. There was one called Pizza Putt here in Burlington, and it closed last year. So that was very sad. We used to go there like every weekend. We were regulars there, and we don't get to go there anymore. When they closed down, we actually bought one of the arcade games they had there. There's a picture of it. It's called Spider Stompin'. So I have my own little arcade in the basement. Got one game in it. I see RIP Pizza Putt in the chat. Indeed, it was it was actually a very sad day for my family when Pizza Putt closed. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start by kind of talking a little bit about, you know, if I was giving a technical talk, right, I would say this is the motivation section, right, the mess we're in. And I want to try to relate this to kind of some problems you've probably heard of. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what are the problems in society that we see when we don't handle some of these privacy and fairness problems that I'm going to talk about. And then I'm going to talk about two of the areas that I actually do research in, so privacy and fairness, and how those problems kind of show up in the way that we're seeing issues pop up in society today, and how we can solve some of those issues. And I'm going to end by talking about, you know, what are some of the pieces that we still need to solve that we don't have good answers for. I missed a question. Have I won the spider game? So it's one of these games where you get a score, and you can get a perfect score. So the way that you play the game is you start the game, and then these things that you stomp on, they light up. And when it lights up, you're supposed to stomp on it. And that's supposed to kind of simulate the fact that you're stomping on a spider. That's why it's called spider stomping. And when one of these things lights up, you stomp on it, and then it makes this sound like a spider being crushed, right? Like a screaming sound, right? The spider goes, ah! And so if you stomp on all the spiders perfectly, then you can get a perfect score, like 100%. And I've done that before, but you can never win. Like the best you can do is get 100% and then move on to the next game. Okay, what would I say is the best privacy thing that blocks things trying to spy? I'm going to say more about this as we go forward. The truth is, there is nothing that can block things that are trying to spy, right? You will be spied on if you use the internet. And that's kind of the sad truth. So I will say more about this as we go along. There are things you can do. You can do things like, there are browser extensions you can install, like there's one called Ghostery. There's do not track modes that you can turn on in your web browser sometimes. You can not use social media. You can not use certain websites. But in general, if you use the internet, if you use a cell phone, you kind of will be tracked, right? So I'll say more about this as we go along. Okay, so why are we in a mess, right? I'm going to say there's two reasons, right? And one of them is that we know a lot more now than we used to know, right? So if I have a whole bunch of data, how can I learn things about individuals that I can use to violate their privacy? It used to be that we had data in like books, right? People who would actually write stuff down. So before we had computers at all, for example. And so if I want to attack somebody's privacy and I have a book full of, say, census data or something like that, it's time consuming and challenging for me to do that. I have to like look through the book physically. And so it was not really considered a big problem before we had computers. So now we have computers. We have, I'm going to show you some examples of AI systems, for example, that can look through data very fast, right? Huge amounts of data. And so the fact that we now have bigger computers and we know more about, honestly, we know more about math, right? Means we're able to track people better, to attack their privacy better. We're able to learn things about people that in some cases they don't know about themselves. These are things that we just couldn't do before because we weren't good at math and we didn't have big computers, right? And so that's been one big driver of this. The other one is that we now carry around these cell phones all the time. So, I have this, I have an Apple iPhone, and honestly, the reason that I have this instead of like a flip phone is because my wife gets worried when I go out on bike rides. She wants to be able to track my location and know that I haven't been hit by a car or something. But basically, everybody has one of these, right? And you kind of have to have a smartphone now to participate in society. And one of the real challenges of this is that it's, first of all, it's a surveillance device, right? So your cell phone is always on, it's always tracking your location. Anytime you use it to do anything, the vendor of the app that you're using to do that gets to see what you're doing. So it's a way for people, other people to see what you are doing. It's also a way for them to affect your behavior. So on your cell phone, if you use any app basically, but especially social media apps, you're going to see ads, right? And the cell phone is kind of like a direct link from those companies to your face to show you ads to get you to do what they want you to do, right? And we've never really had that before. On the TV, for example, right? They've got to show everybody the same ad. I'll talk more about this in a couple of minutes, but the cell phone really has changed things because it's two directional, and the two directions are like fundamentally different than things we had before. Okay. Okay. So here's a question in the Q&A. Do they try to make privacy policies confusing? I assume this is referring to companies in general. So I assume you mean those privacy policies where when you sign up for some service, there's like, here's our privacy policy, you must click agree or you can't sign up for the service, right? And these privacy policies generally are so long that you have no chance of reading the thing even if you want to. And even if you do read it, you're not going to understand it, generally speaking. And I think the answer is like, yes, absolutely. They do make those things confusing. They do make those things confusing on purpose. They want you not to read them. Because if you actually do read them, basically those privacy policies say, you have no rights. We, the company, have all the rights, and we reserve the right to do whatever we want, and you can't sue us for it. And that is like, yes, absolutely. I mean, there have been lawsuits about this where it's very clear that the company has intentionally constructed the privacy policy to mislead people and to, put themselves in a position where they can do bad things on privacy. And we're going to get to this, but I think maybe one of the only ways to really solve that problem is to introduce regulations on companies to just like force them not to do that. Okay. So there's a couple of questions now in the Q&A about cookies. So the first one is, what does I accept the cookie policy mean, right? So this is increasingly common. You go to a website, you'll see at the bottom a little banner that says, we use cookies. Just like every other website, don't worry, it's not a big deal. Please click I accept to accept our cookie policy. What is a cookie, right? So your web browser, normally you go to a website and your web browser's job is just to show you that website, right? But it turns out that it is useful for certain websites to be able to store some information on your computer so that when you come back to their website, they recognize you and they know who you are. So if you have a shopping cart, for example, on Amazon, when you go back to your shopping cart, the same items appear there that were there before. And so the way that on the web you can store this kind of information in somebody's browser is with this thing called cookies. And this was the way that cookies were supposed to be used. They were invented for this, to do things like, I, the website developer, I'm going to store a cookie in your browser that stores all of the items in your cart so that when you come back to your cart, you see the same items again, okay? And that was what cookies were invented for. Very quickly, web developers realized they could store cookies on your web browser that would track you. And they could track those cookies that were stored in your web browser across different websites to get a history of all the websites you have visited over a period of time. Okay, and so they started doing this. And so in Europe, they invented this rule called the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, that says, companies, you can't do this. You can't store cookies on people's devices without at least telling them why you're doing it and what you're doing it for. And so that's why you see those banners, is because now when a website wants to store one of these cookies on your device, they are required by law in Europe to tell you about it. So when you accept that cookie policy, it means that they are going to store cookies on your device, probably for the purposes of tracking you. And they're kind of getting around the rules that are imposed by Europe by telling you that they're going to do this. The banner always implies, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Just click accept. That's what everybody does, right? And that is intentionally misleading you into thinking it's okay to click accept. If you don't click accept, they will track you anyway. So it kind of doesn't matter. It can never hurt your computer to click accept. It just means they're going to store these cookies on your computer. You're not going to get a virus or anything like that. So honestly, it probably doesn't matter that much whether you click accept or not. But it's another one of these places where these sites on the web are kind of intentionally misleading you about their privacy policy. They're implying that nothing bad will happen if you click that accept button because they want to be able to track you. When a website tells you it uses cookies, is it bad? Could it be used for tracking and stuff like that? Yes, absolutely. It could be used for stuff that actually improves your web browsing experience. Like on Amazon, they use them to retain the information in your cart, stuff like that. When you log into a website, when you log into Google, next time you go back to Gmail, you're still logged in. They use cookies to remember that kind of information as well, to keep you logged into websites. But it also gets used for tracking all the time. What happens if you don't accept? So if you don't accept, usually some functionality in the website will break. Sometimes nothing will change at all, right? Because the only thing they were using cookies for was tracking you. And if you click I don't accept, then they will stop tracking you, or they will stop a certain mode of tracking you. And because they didn't use the cookies for anything functional on the website will look the same to you. So, one experiment to try is just always click don't accept, right? And see what happens. Usually nothing bad will happen. But like I said, they have other ways of tracking you. So it probably is not going to help you not be tracked, even if you click I don't accept. If you don't click anything at all, yes, they can still track you, sadly. Why are they named cookies? So that's a really good question. I don't know the full story of this. I think I knew at one time, I want to say, this may be completely wrong. I'm going to take a guess here, and I might be totally wrong about this, that the idea is that So cookies were basically invented to allow websites to remember things that happened in the past. So if I added some item into my cart in the past, the website wants to be able to remember that. So next time I come back to my cart, the item is still there, right? And so there's this, you know, there's a long history in all kinds of kind of folklore things where, folklore is the wrong word here, but like, you know, stories where people leave crumbs, for example, breadcrumbs behind them in order to remember where they have been. And I think it may be the case that the reason they're called cookies is because the idea is that you're kind of leaving crumbs behind to know where you were. This could be just totally something I made up, and I can't remember for sure if this is the kind of legacy behind the name cookies. And I'm going to look this up afterwards because I'm really, really curious now. Not sure if that's the right answer. If a website does not give the option to say no to cookies, you can turn off cookies in your web browser. So you can change the settings of your web browser to disallow all cookies. There are websites that will break if you do this, right? So like Amazon won't show you items in your cart if you do this. So if they don't give you the option, you can still turn them off entirely, but a lot of websites will break. I don't see an option to not accept. There's only a box for accept. You have to go into the site to not accept. So I'm not sure if the rules say they have to give you the option or not. So some websites make it very hard to say I don't accept. You can always just say nothing. I'm going to try to get the camera here to focus better. The focus is okay. It's getting dark outside and there's not quite enough light for the camera. So you can always do nothing and just leave that banner there at the bottom, and then you haven't accepted, right? I don't know what the rules say. I believe that the law says, in Europe at least, and most companies just kind of apply that law to everybody, that if you haven't clicked anything, then that means they better not send you any cookies. But I'm not sure about that. So I will say before I move on this tracking issue, that there are tracking approaches that work regardless of whether there's cookies or not, right? So even if you turn all cookies off in your web browser, you can still be tracked. And one of the ways that you can still be tracked is there are mechanisms specifically designed for tracking you across the internet. Facebook has one, Google has one. Google's is called Google Analytics. And the kind of hook that they use to get you is if you're a website developer, you can get for free this Google Analytics product that tells you statistics about the people who visit your website. And that information is useful to a lot of web developers. And so they install this thing on their website. And guess what? What this thing actually does is it runs some JavaScript code in your browser that tells Google who you are. And so you can be tracked by stuff like that, even if you have turned all cookies off. You can turn off all JavaScript in your browser, but at this point, basically the whole web will break if you turn off JavaScript. So there's basically no surefire way to stop yourself from being tracked on the internet. Is it bad to remove cookies with a remover because it won't remember your cart? It usually will hurt you only a time, like nothing severely bad can happen if you remove cookies. They're intended to be temporary. And so websites will always have a way to recover if you remove cookies. Maybe your items will go away from your cart, just add them again. I mean, it's never the case that something catastrophic will happen if you remove cookies. They have tracking built in. Yes, absolutely. Tracking is basically built into everything now. Okay, so who's seen this social dilemma, right? I imagine a lot of you have seen this. You're asking really good questions, so I bet a lot of you have seen this. If you haven't seen this, you should go see it, right? This is a documentary. It's on Netflix, and it's all about kind of what social media companies are doing to or what they are doing, right? They have a lot of reasons for doing it. They have several reasons for doing it. They have some really important reasons. The major one is they want to make more money. And the way these companies make money is they show you ads. And the more time you spend looking at your phone on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, the more ads you're going to look at. So the more money they're going to make, right? And so there's this kind of built-in incentive in this business model to make the product more addictive. And this documentary is really all about this, right? It's really, they interview a whole bunch of people that used to work at some of these companies, and these people talk about, like, yes, we go to work every day and we make the products more addictive, right? And they say it indirectly, right? And in fact, Facebook has, written a whole bunch of things to try to persuade you that this is not true. All of these companies are trying to persuade you that this is not true. Here are some selected quotes from Facebook's response to the Social Dilemma documentary. They say, Facebook builds its products to create value, not to be addictive. I'm not even sure what that means. What does create value mean? And it's related, I think, to the second point, you are not the product. So one of the points that people make about products like Facebook or about systems like Facebook is, the person who is paying Facebook is the advertiser, right? You are not paying Facebook as a user of Facebook. And so you are not really the customer, right? You're not paying Facebook. So why should they care about you? They care what the advertisers think. They don't care what you think. And so Facebook says, oh, Facebook is funded by advertising, so it remains free for people. This seems to me completely contradictory to the part in bold, right? If you are not the product, then Facebook should be funded by you, right? When you go buy a car, you're the customer because you are paying for the car. So I'm not convinced by this, but Facebook has written a lot of stuff about this to say, we promise we are not trying to make the product more addictive. We're trying to make it more useful, right? But I think there's a lot of evidence that, in fact, there's this implicit incentive that Facebook and these other companies have to make the product more addictive. The more addictive their product is, the more money they're going to make because the more ads they get to show you. And my personal opinion is that in 20 years we're going to look back and be like, well, duh, of course, right? It's kind of like the way we look at cigarette companies now. In the 90s, it wasn't even that long ago, there were these lawsuits against cigarette companies where, in court, they said to the cigarette company CEOs, do you think cigarettes are addictive? And they stood there and they said no, right? And we look back and we say, duh, right? And I think probably that'll be the case in 20 years. So I encourage you to go see that documentary. It's on Netflix, it's easy to watch. And I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but it's really informative. I want to get some questions. Would there be a problem using Facebook without an account? Not saying I use it, of course. So first of all, I don't want to tell you to delete your social media accounts, right? Because Facebook really has us in a tough position here. It's basically impossible to be a functioning member of society now without using these products, right? They are essentially utilities. It's like telling you, oh yeah, you should delete your electricity account. You should just stop using electricity because the electric company is going to track you. It's like not a choice, right? You can't throw away your cell phone. You can't delete your Facebook account. People can't function in society that way anymore, right? It's kind of a false choice. I don't have a Facebook account. I am in a position of real privilege to be able to say, I'm going to kind of put my money where my mouth is and not use it. But for a lot of people, it's just not an option to do that, okay? So I'm not going to tell you to delete your account because I don't think that's a realistic option for a lot of people. But here's the bottom line. They're going to track you no matter what. They have these things called shadow profiles. And there are former employees of Facebook that have talked about this. This was a real thing that has happened, and I bet it's ongoing, where even if you don't have a Facebook account, in their servers, they have records about you. And they track you wherever you go on the internet. Those websites that have the little tracker embedded in them, the Facebook tracker, they track you whether or not you have a Facebook account. And so they have an account for me. They have all kinds of information about me. They collect contact details from Facebook members. And so if somebody else has my phone number in their phone book on their iPhone or something, then when that person joins Facebook, Facebook gets to learn my phone number. So that account, that shadow account about me, has a lot of information about me that I never gave to Facebook. And they keep track of that and they keep that in their servers. I'm sure they know a whole lot about me, well more than I would like them to know, even though I don't have an account. So deleting your account doesn't really solve the problem anyway. Am I evil for putting cookies in my coding projects? No, absolutely not. I would say if you are a web developer and you really want to be proactive about this, don't use tracking products. Don't use Google Analytics. Don't use the Facebook Analytics products. It's fine to use cookies. Cookies are not inherently bad. If you need cookies to store state on somebody's browser, like storing the items in their cart so that you can remember those when they come back to your site, that is a perfect use for cookies. Cookies are not inherently bad. JavaScript code is not inherently bad. Even though these are used for really bad things in a lot of cases now, they're not inherently bad, and I'm not going to say don't use them. If you're not trying to track anybody, then there's no problem with it, right? So absolutely, I think that's fine. Okay, why do people want to track us, and could it be dangerous? They want to track you to make money, okay? So it all comes back to this. If they can figure out how to make you spend more time looking at ads, then they can send you more ads, and they can make more money. So they don't really, there's not like some secret plan at Facebook to say, we're going to track all these people and that's going to like allow us to take over the world, right? That's not the deal. They just want to make more money. And I think it's pretty simple. I think that's kind of the bottom line. But what they figured out, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, is that the more they know about you, the better job they can do making you look at ads for longer. Okay? And so they want to know as much about you as they can possibly learn. Okay, so they win no matter what. No, they don't win no matter what, right? They don't win if we design laws that limit what they can do, okay? And I'm going to get to this in a minute also, but I think that's kind of the only way to prevent them from winning. Okay, kind of obvious about Facebook. It's literally a book of faces. It's a good point. Okay, so I want to talk about something I call tech washing. I didn't invent this term, but this term has been used in other ways, and so I want to define what I mean by it when I say tech washing. So tech washing, in the way that I'm going to use it today, is the process of using technology or using math or using science to basically convince you that something is neutral or something is inherently good or okay, or that you should kind of assume that it's not going to have a bad effect on society, right? And AI and machine learning are good examples of this, right? So how does Facebook work? The Social Dilemma, I think, does a really good job of kind of anthropomorphizing this almost, right? They have these scenes where there are actors pretending to be artificial intelligence agents, right? Trying to figure out how to send a particular person a particular ad to make them do something. And this is what actually happens at places like Facebook. They do machine learning, or AI, and they generate these machine learning algorithms where the input to the machine learning algorithm is everything they know about you plus some goal, right? And the goal is something like maximize ad revenue. And then the machine learning algorithm does something and nobody really knows what it does, right? Like literally nobody knows what it does. And what comes out is something, right? They ask the machine learning algorithm, what ad should we show you next on Facebook? And the machine learning algorithm says, I think this ad for a car would be really good. And they show you the ad, right? And they say, we're not trying to make the product addictive, right? We just have these machine learning algorithms that are really good at what they do. They make the products useful. They add value by increasing ad revenue. They kind of use this language to almost kind of pull the wool over our eyes about what the goal really is, right? In a sense, this process of tech washing is outsourcing the blame to a technological artifact. In this case, that machine learning model, that thing in blue. It's intended to be like a kind of icon that looks a little bit like a brain, but kind of like a computer brain. This happens over and over and over again, right? There are these technology products that people say, the product is neutral, or the tool is neutral. It's just a tool, right? And Facebook says this is just a tool for connecting people. But the goals that they feed into this machine learning algorithm are things like maximize ad revenue. And then they say, okay, now anything that happens next is not our problem because it's just math in there, right? And then the machine learning algorithm figures out, oh, actually, in order to maximize ad revenue, what I should do is I should make the product more addictive, right? They've outsourced these very negative things to this technology product so that they can wash their hands of it, right? And that's what I call tech washing. And we're going to see some other examples of this. It's pervasive, right? Whenever somebody tells you a tool is neutral or they're just building the tools and how people use it is up to them, like, be skeptical, okay? That's my opinion. Be skeptical because this might be happening. they might be kind of outsourcing the bad stuff to math or technology. Yeah, so in the chat, somebody says, I would have inflicted laws on Facebook a long time ago. I think I would have too. So here's a question. How much time do you spend using your phone every day? I think that my computer is doing an interesting thing here because of this. Let me.
Okay, so I've launched the poll and everybody started to take it. So hopefully you all see the poll and put your answer in. If for some reason you don't see it, just put your answer in the chat box. But it looks like most of you have gone in. I know a couple of you are doubled up on one computer. So hopefully you all, like Jack and Simon, hopefully you guys can agree on what your answer is. Same with Scout and Summit.
So this is a good question actually in the chat. I don't have a phone, does a computer count, right? I'm impressed. There's not a lot of people who don't have phones anymore. I wish I didn't have one, to be honest. I was thinking just phones, honestly, because that's kind of the most pervasive setting. I will admit that I have lots of problems getting distracted on the computer. I have locked down my phone so it doesn't even have a web browser on it because I just can't keep myself from wasting time looking at websites.
I'm impressed that you all are saying less than an hour. I am bad. I'm on Facebook, but I use it, I read the news. So I use Facebook because I'm on like various news organizations and that's how I read the paper.
I've started getting my news from podcasts only because then at least it's like in a defined period of time and I can't, products like Facebook, but also if you just go to like a newspaper website now, the websites are designed to keep you clicking on the next thing. And just my personality, I can't help myself. I just always click on the next thing. Part of the reason that I take kind of, in some ways, extremist positions to say like, it is not your fault. It is the product that is addictive. And partly that's me selfishly reacting to the way that I use these products or fail to. I get sucked into these really easily. But it's not just me, right? The average, according to this, there's an article, there's a link down here. The average is about 3 hours and 30 minutes per day. So I am actually really impressed that, people use their phones less than an hour. That's really impressive. I struggled to keep it below that. And I deleted all the apps from my phone. Like literally all I can do is text people and look at Google Maps. What program are you using to combine you and your screen? So the program that you're seeing that has me in it is like a webcam viewer. So it's just a program that displays what your webcam is seeing. And I'm screen sharing and just showing you what that program is outputting. And then this window right here is just a web browser window showing my Google Slides. Okay, so here's what I'm going to claim is the solution. Here's what I think is the solution. This is me speculating, okay? So I don't have any great evidence for this, but I don't know that there's a lot of evidence in another direction either. So I'm going to claim this is as good a solution as any. I think that the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out the world we want to live in, right? So I would claim that what we've got now is not that world, but we need to figure out what that world looks like. And this is, to a large extent, what my research is about, right? So this is, there's a lot of science as well, right? There's a lot of math specifically to define exactly what I mean when I say we should want this in the world. But at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to define, exactly what should we want out of a better world. The second piece of this, though, is regulation, I think, right? And so the question was asked earlier, how do you make Facebook fix themselves? I don't think you do. I don't think that the market can figure this out, right? It is one of these things where any company, even if there were competition for Facebook, and there's not really, but even if there were many Facebooks, they would all be incentivized to do the same thing because all of them would make more money if they do that, right? And so I don't think there's any market force that can fix this. I think you need the government, like they do for safety regulations, like they do for, to make sure that the power company can't charge you too much, right? We need regulations like that on companies like Facebook. So I'll come back to this at the end of the talk, but I think this is kind of the two-step process we need. How many people have sued Facebook in the questions? I don't know, actually. It's probably quite a few, but the truth is our laws right now don't prevent them from doing a lot of these things that they're doing. And so actual substantive lawsuits on privacy issues, I think, have been pretty rare. I mean, most of the stuff they're doing is legal. I think it's bad, but it's legal. Okay, so let's talk about the privacy problem. So when I talk about data privacy, in terms of defining my research, right? I define it this way. I say, take for granted we're going to collect a lot of data about people. How do we make use of that data, right? How do we actually get something useful out of it while still protecting people's privacy, okay? And so in kind of intuitive terms, what I mean by that is, you know, we should be able to learn something from this data, right? If I collect, say, a whole bunch of health records, I should be able to analyze the health records and figure out, you know, does this drug work or not, right? That's useful information. It doesn't violate anybody's privacy because it's a property of the population. It's a property of everybody, right? I want to be able to learn stuff like that, right? The world is a better place if I can use data to learn things like that, okay? So how do we enable uses of data that look like that while still preventing the ones that are the kind of zero in on one person to learn something about that person? I want to give an example of where this kind of thing can fail. So probably most of you have not heard of the Netflix Prize. When I talked about this, say 5 years ago, a lot of people had heard about it. But this was kind of a long time ago now. So Netflix released a whole bunch of movie ratings data. And now on Netflix, all you can do is give it thumbs up or thumbs down, but you used to be able to give it a number of stars. And they released a bunch of anonymized movie rating data, and they were hoping that machine learning researchers would help them figure out how to do recommendations better, right? So they released these anonymized data. And what do you think happened, right? So here's a poll. How likely do you think you are to be uniquely identified by your movie ratings, right? So clearly Netflix was making the assumption that they could release these movie ratings and people would not be uniquely identified. So what do you think?
All right, so I just launched the poll. Let us know what you think.
So these movie, in the chat, somebody says, I thought you said anonymous. So the movie ratings were just the ratings. There were no names attached, okay? It was literally just like, you know, for The Matrix, they gave it 5 stars, right? For Lord of the Rings, they gave it 5 stars. There were no people names attached. So I don't rate movies either on Netflix, actually, not anymore, because a few years after this, they changed their recommendation algorithm. And what I've heard is that they don't even try to recommend movies you're going to like anymore. They recommend movies that are cheap for Netflix to show you. So they have all these like titles that they paid for, the ones that have the Netflix logo on them. And those are cheap. If you watch that movie, it doesn't cost Netflix anything. And so they recommend those to you. They don't say what they do anymore, so it's not clear. So it looked like most people said somewhat likely, right? So there were some researchers, Arvind Narayanan and Vitaly Shmatikov, who are still doing a lot of really great work in this area. What they did is they correlated movie ratings with similar ratings that were on a website called the Internet Movie Database. And they found that, in fact, you can figure out who gave the ratings just by looking at the rating itself. They were able to re-identify, I think, about 18% of Netflix customers just using the Internet Movie Database data. And this is called a linking attack, and this is really common. If you have some data that's been anonymized, so somebody took all the names out, then you can re-identify people in that data by taking data from somewhere else that you often call auxiliary data, and you link them together, right? So if I have movie ratings from Netflix, and I also have similar ratings from Internet Movie Database, but the Internet Movie Database ratings have names attached, I can figure out the names for the Netflix customers, right? And so this is super common. The kind of, I'll say this really quickly. You can't solve this using a security approach either, right? So, Netflix intended to release this data. Nobody hacked them. They released this data on purpose. They thought they had anonymized it, but in fact, that anonymity guarantee was not very strong, not as strong as they thought it was. I want to give one more example of this. New York City releases taxi data. This is an example that is not maybe as popular or as well known, but is one of my favorites. This guy named Anthony Takar, he went to celebrity gossip websites and he found pictures like the ones on the slide there of celebrities getting into taxis. And he was able to figure out which taxi trips in the taxi data were the ones that the celebrities had taken. And so he was able to figure out where those celebrities went to. And if I'm the person who works at the New York City taxi agency or whatever it is, and I'm trying to anonymize this data, I'm never in a million years going to consider, oh, what if somebody goes to a celebrity gossip website and gets photos, right? Like, it's not a thing I'm going to think about. And so these linking attacks against anonymized data are often really easy to do and really hard to defend against. I want to skip this poll so I don't run out of time. So here's the bottom line. Anonymization doesn't work, okay? This is a picture in the top right of LaTanya Sweeney, who did a lot of the early work on this. And I like to think of her as kind of the original privacy myth buster, because for decades, there was this myth that if you just remove the names from data, then it's okay, it's anonymized, and you can't learn anything about individuals from it. And this is just like not true at all. And back in like 2001, Massachusetts started releasing anonymized medical records, and they were like, this is gonna, medical studies will advance by decades because this data is available. And LaTanya Sweeney actually went through there and found the medical records of the governor of Massachusetts and sent them to him in the mail, this was 2001. And, the governor very quickly stopped the program, right? And at the time, people thought this was a good approach. And LaTanya Sweeney has shown over and over and over again that it is not a good approach. Anonymizing data just doesn't work. And in fact, the general result that she found is that if somebody knows your zip code, your gender, and your date of birth, for 87% of people who live in the United States, that is enough to figure out, to uniquely identify, right? So that combination of 3 values, for 87% of the people in the United States, nobody else shares those values, okay? So this kind of auxiliary data attack where somebody can figure out information about you by having some other source of information about you, sadly, this is almost always possible when you're dealing with anonymized data. So this is a picture of a website. Here's a link at the bottom here. It's called aboutmyinfo.org. You can actually put in your zip code, gender, and date of birth, and it will tell you how many people share them. For me, it's nobody. I'm the only one. So I'm in the 87%. So differential privacy is where I do a lot of my research. And I'm going to go through this quickly. But if you've heard of differential privacy, it's maybe from this talk or a similar one like it. Differential privacy actually is used in the iPhone to collect statistics about the way people use phones. And it's also used on Mac computers, and Apple uses it in several places. Differential privacy is a way to define what privacy means in math, okay? And it's robust against these kind of auxiliary data attacks. So you can't do the thing against differential privacy that you could do against anonymization. Can you put the info link in the chat? Let's see, that's kind of challenging for me to do. I don't have a great way to do it. I will put in the chat after I'm done a link to the slides themselves, so you can get all the links from there. It is, and I'll also try to put those links in the chat also. What does anonymization mean? So anonymization is a really kind of poorly defined term. Usually it means removing people's names from the data. Sometimes it means removing what they call personally identifiable information. So that's like names and phone numbers and email addresses and social security numbers. And the question then is like, what is personally identifiable? And the answer is basically everything, right? So movie reviews are personally identifiable because you can use them to identify people. We saw an example of that. So anonymization is usually it means removing personally identifiable information. The reason it doesn't work is because in reality, all information is identifying information. Okay, so differential privacy is like math for privacy, right? How do you get differential privacy? So say I have an analyst who wants to answer some question using data. They're going to ask this question of the database. They're going to get back some query result, and we're going to add some random noise to it, okay? And if we add random noise to it, we get a differentially private result. And so the math of differential privacy tells you how much noise you have to add in order to satisfy this mathematical definition of privacy, okay? So you add noise. You have to add just the right amount of random noise to get a differentially private result, okay? So the study of differential privacy is basically all about figuring out how much noise to add and when do you add it, okay? So as an example, if I'm asking a question like how many people live in Vermont, I may get the answer, 600 something thousand, right? And then I'm going to add a small amount of random noise. Like maybe I ask my computer for a random number between 1 and 10, right? And it gives me back like 5.632. And I add that 5.632 to the real answer to my question, and that's my differentially private answer. And it's that randomness that gives me privacy, okay? Random noise meaning, generally speaking, random numbers, okay? So you ask your computer, generate me a random number. The more noise you add to your results, the more privacy you get. There is this thing called the privacy parameter or the privacy budget. It's often written with the Greek letter epsilon. That's that thing there. So if you've heard of the privacy budget, that's what they're talking about. If you have more data, so what you're doing when you're adding random noise to stuff is you're giving out the wrong answer, right? So if I add a random number to my answer, then that means my answer is going to be wrong. So if I have more data, I'm going to get closer to the right answer while maintaining privacy. So there's this trade-off in differential privacy. You have to give the wrong answer. That's how you get privacy. But if you have a lot of data, then you can get quite close to the real answer while still protecting privacy. Okay? Does Zoom use all of this stuff? Zoom uses end-to-end encryption sometimes. Zoom has done some stuff that's a little bit shady, so it's not 100% clear what they do. They don't use differential privacy that I'm aware of, but they also don't collect statistics that I'm aware of. So it's not like they have data that they need to be using differential privacy on. I hope that is true. I hope they're not collecting statistics about us. Okay, I'm going to skip this averaging attack. So who's using differential privacy? So Apple, I mentioned. Google has been using differential privacy to collect browser statistics for a while. So if you use Chrome on your computer, they're collecting information about how you use your browser with differential privacy. These are good uses of differential privacy, right? It means that they can collect statistics that help them make decisions about how to make the product better, but they can never find out specific information about you. This differentially private information can never be used to target ads at you specifically. And this is exactly what I think we should want from privacy, right? We should want data that is useful, right? That allows us to learn things. But at the same time, that data should be not useful to do things specifically targeted at one person. Another user of differential privacy that I want to mention is the US Census Bureau. So Census is right now working on their 2020 count of everybody in the United States. When they release that data, it's going to be protected using differential privacy. They actually did an internal audit over the past few years that showed that their previous privacy practices were terrible for exactly the reasons I showed you, just like the Netflix prize, just like this New York City taxi data. You could re-identify people in the US Census data. And so they're going to be using differential privacy in the future to protect that information, which is really cool. I'm really excited about this. Do you know anything about the DAR web? Maybe that means the dark web. I think probably the question is about the dark web. So the dark web is this really vaguely defined nebulous thing, right? And I don't know too much about it because this is not related to my research really. But basically the dark web is, websites that are hard to find using a regular web browser and a regular internet connection. And there's a system called Tor for browsing the internet anonymously. It's spelled T-O-R. And a lot of these kind of dark web websites, you have to use Tor to get to them. And it's not really clear to me what you can do on the dark web these days, right? There's all these rumors about like, oh, you can go on there and you can get like information that Russian hackers have stolen from people. I don't know, maybe that's true. I don't really know. One thing I do know is it used to be that you could go on the dark web, this vaguely defined idea. You could go through Tor and you could go to a website called the Silk Road where people would buy drugs and stuff. And that website is no longer there. So that's a very popular example of a dark web website, and it's no longer available. What about the deep web? I'm actually not sure what the deep web is. Maybe it's some subset of the dark web. I think I've heard that term, but I don't know what it means. So here's some of the research that is actually going on at UVM in the Plaid lab. That's a picture of a PhD student in the lab named Chike Abua. And he's been working on a system that can help programmers write programs to satisfy this differential privacy idea. Okay? One of the big challenges in differential privacy, and one of the reasons that there aren't more users of it, that this slide doesn't have more logos on it, is that it's really hard to implement differentially private programs. It's easy to get it wrong. If you write a program that adds the wrong amount of noise, then the program will look like it's running correctly, but it will not satisfy this privacy requirement that you have. So what Chike has been working on is a system called Duet that actually checks that a program you wrote does satisfy the property, okay? And the goal here is to enable more people to write programs that satisfy differential privacy, and that's kind of where Chike is going with this work. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about deep learning and AI. So here's a picture of a deep learning system that can turn zebras into horses and horses into zebras. So that first row of pictures, this one right here, there's a picture of a zebra. That's a real picture of real zebras. And then they asked the system, turn this picture into a picture of horses. And the picture on the right-hand side is the horses that come out. And on the bottom row, it's doing the reverse. It's turning a horse into a zebra. So there's all kinds of cool pictures you can find on the internet of these kinds of systems. And so here's fake people, right? So these are pictures of people who are not real people, right? They were invented by a deep learning system. So they look like real pictures. They're not real people. So do you think that deep learning automatically preserves privacy? So there's a poll for this.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that up, and I just launched it.
So go ahead and respond to the poll. This may be too easy at this point, right? Because every single time I've asked you a question, do you think that privacy will be preserved in this instance, right? And the answer every time so far has been, surprisingly, despite what your intuition might tell you, the answer is no, it won't be. So once again, the answer is no. This is a pictorial example. I don't know if I should be able to see the responses, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had, can you see the results now?
Oh, there they are. I see them now. Yes.
Okay.
So most people have gotten the message here that, in fact, every time I ask this question, probably the answer is going to be no. So here's a picture of what's called a model inversion attack. And the picture on the right-hand side where it says training example, this is a picture of a person that was used to train an AI system. Okay, so this is one of the pictures that was used to kind of tell the machine learning system what to do. And the picture on the left is extracted from the trained model. And so what this means is that if I participate in training some machine learning system, then that means anything that I put into the system as part of that training, somebody else can come along later and extract, okay? And so if there's pictures of me that go into this image recognition system or something like that, then potentially somebody could come along later and pull those pictures of me out. And hopefully those pictures weren't, pictures I wanted to be kept private, right? So why should we care about this? Well, Facebook has all your pictures, right? they're using those pictures to train image recognition systems that are based on this kind of AI technology. Those systems don't protect your privacy. So this is another student in our lab. His name is Tim Stevens, and he's a PhD student, and he's working on developing differentially private systems for training these kinds of AI systems. And so you take one of these deep learning models, say for image recognition, you put it into a system that he's working on called the immediate sensitivity checker, and it tells you how to add noise to that system to satisfy this definition of differential privacy. And the results so far that Tim has been working on suggest that you can actually add just enough noise to these AI systems so that this kind of attack becomes impossible. But the system can still recognize images, like this picture has a cat in it, right? Or this picture has a dog in it. And so this is another piece of research that's going on in our lab. This is the thing that Tim is working on, where we're trying to get to a point where we can build these AI-based systems without violating people's privacy. So this is another instance of tech washing, right? We have these machine learning systems. They produce more addictive products. If we have differential privacy here, then this is a more ideal world, right? It means that they can't use these personalized models to make the product more addictive. All right, so I want to go really quickly through this fairness issue. I do want to get to the end, but I don't want to go over time, okay? So I'm going to go fairly quickly here. I want to make sure I can see, okay, cool. So I don't see any open questions right now. So I want to talk about predictive policing, right? This is one of the most visible issues in what I would call algorithmic fairness, which is another area that I do research in. This is an example of a person who was wrongfully arrested because an AI-based system said that this person is the person that there was a warrant for, right? It was a facial recognition system. It said, yeah, this is the person we're looking for. It was not the same person, right? They arrested the wrong person because an AI system got this facial recognition problem wrong, okay? So, sure, facial recognition systems could be wrong sometimes, but it is wrong in very bad ways, okay? And these systems that do kind of police-oriented tasks are wrong in very ways that should make you extremely nervous, overwhelmingly, okay? So this is an example of an article from ProPublica a while back, where they looked at a system called Compass that predicts how likely somebody who's been arrested is to commit another offense later on. And this system is an AI-based system. It's not clear exactly how it works, but this system predicts that people will reoffend are much more likely to reoffend if they are Black, right? And just overwhelmingly so, right? The system is just incredibly biased against Black people. And why is this? You know, the people who make this product would claim, well, we just put data in, right? You know, we didn't do this on purpose. This happens over and over and over again, even if people aren't doing it on purpose, okay? Especially when you use these AI-based systems. So I want to go through this quickly, but you know, here's another poll that I intended to show, but I'm going to give you the answer, right? It's all of the above, right? Machine learning systems do all of these things. If I give it some data and there's bias in the data, it's going to learn how to be biased, right? If I give my machine learning system data about previous outcomes in criminal trials, right? It's going to figure out that our criminal justice system as it exists today is biased, right? And the machine learning system is going to replicate that bias. It's going to, in some cases, amplify that bias, right? And this happens just over and over and over again. And it's another form of tech washing, right? We have companies that are building products and they're saying, it's just math, right? It's just machine learning. It does what the data tells it to do. And you shouldn't accept that as an answer because we know that this is a major problem. Okay? There are some people doing really, really good work in this area that, you know, kind of were really pioneers in calling out this kind of behavior. Here are two of them, Joy Bolomwini, I'm really bad at this name, I apologize for that, and Timnit Gebru, did some of the early work in this, where they said these facial recognition products, like the one that made that false arrest that I showed you earlier, these are biased against Black people. They are just not very good at recognizing Black people, right? And this thing on the far right, this is showing the fact that that box is really big, that's showing that these products are not confident about identifying Black women in particular, right? So they are really bad at correctly identifying people, in particular when they are Black women, right? And we know this. And since this paper came out, a lot of companies, including Amazon and I think IBM, pulled their facial recognition products off the market because it was very clear that they were incredibly biased. They've since proposed, some of the same authors, Timnit was involved in this work, they've since proposed that, like, we know how to check for this, right? Let's just check for it before we release the products. And this is an approach called model cards that's intended to do this. And I think this is a really interesting piece of work. So okay, there's a question. Is Dominion, the ballot counter thing, a biased system? As far as I know, this Dominion thing, I don't know much about it. As far as I know, that thing doesn't have any AI in it, right? It's just people putting in votes, and then it adds up the votes, right? There's lots of bias in our voting system, tons of it, all over the place. Voter ID laws are a good example of this, right? Voter ID laws, you know, I guess you could debate this, but I don't think there's a lot of evidence against it. You know, I think it's pretty clear that those kinds of laws are racist. And, you know, that's the kind of place that I think we need to be looking for bias in our voting systems. The primary way that these algorithmic fairness issues come up is when you introduce AI into a system and then blame the AI for some of these problems. So this is some work that's going on in our lab. We have an awesome PhD student named Crystal Mann who's doing this work. And what we're working on is a way of detecting unfairness as predictions are being made by these systems. So this is a graph from a paper that we wrote together recently, where the orange predictions are the unfair ones and the blue ones are the fair ones. And because you see that spike that's a little bit farther over to the right, what that indicates is that our system is able to detect when the machine learning system is making biased predictions. So what we hope is that we can turn this into something that can kind of monitor these systems that are, you know, showing you ads or recognizing people's faces or things like that. We can monitor those in real time. And when they start making biased predictions, we can raise an alarm. We can say, hey, you need to look at this. So this is another example of tech washing. The goal is identify this face. We get biased predictions out. If we had mitigations for this kind of fairness problem, hopefully we wouldn't end up with these biased models. Okay, so I want to wrap up real quick. I want to come back to this, right? So we're working on this first part. What do we want? And I showed you a couple of examples of this. With differential privacy, we're trying to say, here's the privacy we want. It would make the world a better place if we required companies to use this. On the fairness side of things, I went through that kind of quickly, but what I was trying to show you is that we need to enforce that when companies use these AI systems, they put mitigations in place to make sure that those AI systems aren't negatively affecting people in the real world in a biased way. So we're trying to move towards defining exactly what it means to say, here's what a better world looks like. But I think how do we actually enforce those things is going to require regulation. And there's some really good people working on this too. So this is Radit Abebe. She's starting as an assistant professor at UC Berkeley next year. And she's working on problems that involve humans and technology, right? And so a lot of her research is about how do we put humans into the loop to help them kind of embed with the technology so that we get, at the very least, we know when these systems are doing bad, biased things, okay? So how do we get it? Well, I think we need to kind of raise awareness that these things are happening. I think that's starting to happen, right? So documentaries like The Social Dilemma are already doing this. I think a lot of people already are way more aware of these issues than they were even a year ago. Delete your social media. I think this is too hard for a lot of people, right? This is not a you problem. This is a Facebook problem. It's their fault. It's not your fault. And so should you be made to suffer for this? I don't think so. So if you're in a privileged position like I am, and deleting Facebook is not going to mess up your life, then yeah, sure, do it. I think it can help Facebook to realize that they need to change. But I don't think they're really going to change in the end unless there are laws that force them to change, okay? And so I think the real answer is we need regulation on these companies. We need to force them to move towards this kind of more ideal world that in our research, some of us are trying to kind of map out. Okay. So I'm gonna stop there. I thank you so much for all these awesome questions. I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in for a second. I'm gonna throw up one last poll for you all to just give some feedback on today. And if you have any final questions, get them into the Q&A. We know we're right on time, but we'll run over if you have questions. Just first do the poll that I just launched. And then if you do have any final questions for Joe, just put them into the Q&A box and we will get them answered. You guys have been so great today with your questions. Always impressed. So I'm gonna just like a few more of you to answer the poll. Let's give it another 10, 20 seconds. And then we'll see if any questions come in. Anyone else gonna take the poll? And I'll leave it up for a sec. I don't see any final questions. So let's all thank Joe for all of this fantastic information and for giving us his time today. I know, Joe, you said you were going to throw up the link to the slides. If you want, you can, I have them. I can email them out because I know some people have already, well, actually, if you want the link, don't log out yet because he'll pop it up into the chat. And then hopefully we will see you all next week. We have 3 more cafes in December, and then we'll have a break over the holiday time, and we'll start back up again then in mid-January. But we have 3 good ones coming up, so hopefully we'll see you all there, and I hope that everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Eat some turkey, relax with your family, you know, be grateful for what you have, and just, yeah, find gratitude in the day.